National and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Back to the motherland, back to the garden, back to your plastic.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's coming up on the show. We'll speak with someone from Partnership Against Cancer about warnings from the World Health Organization. It says cancer is expected to rise, along with needs for services for cancer patients. How prepared is Canada? We'll learn more on that. Self-checkout systems are becoming quite common, but will retailers continue going full speed ahead with the tech or ease off because of continuing issues with theft? A Manitoba woman living with severe mental illness is devastated by Ottawa's choice to delay medical assistance in dying for those with conditions like her. She calls it discriminatory, and we'll find out why. But first, we'll hear about an international ice competition held in Winnipeg and how the event was affected by warm weather. Stay tuned. That's all coming up this hour on Information Radio. It's 6:11, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the head of Winnipeg's transit union is angry after a driver was assaulted on Saturday. It happened on a route in northeast Winnipeg. The driver managed to stop the bus and let other passengers off, but he wasn't able to get off. Union President Chris Scott says that is a big concern. We'll hear more from him coming up. And the Marlborough Hotel has been getting a lot of attention after a widely shared video showed a young First Nations woman zip-tied in the lobby while security waited for police. The Marlborough is one of 31 establishments on a list where First Nations people can stay when they're in Winnipeg for health services. We're going to hear about another place on that list that's doing things differently. That's coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. And joining us now with a look at the weather and the traffic is Corey Funk.
Good morning, Emily. Welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, well, it's if I could describe the weather this morning, it would be like murder mystery novel in London.
Because of all the fog.
Yes, yeah. And even some periods of drizzle today. 0 right now at the Forks, heading for a high of 3 with some periods of drizzle, dipping down just to 0 overnight, so not even heading into freezing territory really that much. But you can expect it to be overcast, and really just looking ahead for the whole week, it's going to be that kind of weather pretty much right up until Friday. Overcast, highs at 3 degrees, and then dips just below 0. But then by the weekend, actually, the long-term forecast is actually showing we hit more wintry conditions. And actually, if you're curious about it, that's pretty much for all of southern Manitoba is what it's looking at right now, is that kind of drizzly, gross. But it is winter actually up in north. Dooley Lake right now is our cold spot this morning, minus 22. So winter is still a thing in Manitoba.
Yeah. People in north are like, hello.
Yeah, exactly. It does exist here. So good morning to you, to Dooley Lake. Glad at least you still have it. Probably you'd rather maybe have a little bit warmer, but it is, I guess, February. So it's kind of more seasonal up into Dooley Lake right now. Good morning to you. Already got a call from Thomas on the commuter line. Freezing rain on Highway 16 is what he's saying. So that's around Biscarthoe Lake, Strathclair. You did have to slow down or so because it is a little bit slick. So he's going about 90 just to make sure he's driving as safely as possible. Also, fog advisory in effect for all of southern Manitoba right now. Very thick fog. He's noticing that fog on Highway 16. I noticed already the fog on the way in this morning in Winnipeg on my run. And and slippery sidewalks as well. So do look out for that. If you see anything else going on out there on your commute, if you're walking, biking, driving, just let me know, especially on those highways. Very curious to see what you're seeing in terms of that fog advisory that's going on right now. So give me a call, 204-788-3093.
It's 6:14 and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg and worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and the CBC Listen app. Artists from around the world have flocked to downtown Winnipeg to create unique ice sculptures. The 2024 Winterscape International Ice Carving Competition was held over the weekend at True North Square, and teams from all over the world and as far away as the Philippines came to compete. But how does the balmy, warm temperature affect the ice sculpting? Radio-Canada's Maid Godard found out.
I'm Peter Hargraves, and I'm with Sputnik Architecture and Anvil Tree working together to produce Winterscape, which is this specific event, carving out of ice competition, and it's part of Winter Wonderland, which is the Downtown Biz program for activating the downtown in wintertime.
Tell me what people can expect when they come down here today.
So we have 5 carvings done by 5 different artists, all carved out of Red River ice, which is what you see behind me here. It's a competition, so at 2 o'clock a judge is going to come and look at all the pieces and then judge the pieces, and there's first, second, and third prize based on that judgment, and then there's also a People's Choice Award, so they can expect to see finished carvings. It's plus 2 or 3 now, so it's a small miracle it all came together, but the Mother Nature did provide us with really good ice this year, and then we had a bit of a weather bomb this last week and a half, so the ice we pulled out of the river on Wednesday is beautiful, clear blue ice, so we're very grateful for that. Well, we did have all our ice harvested last week, but with the warm weather it was mostly ruined. So we reharvested on Wednesday. We rented a big freezer truck, and we took it right out of the river, put it into the truck, and then delivered it down here and we put it in the shade so that it couldn't be damaged. So it was a big pivot at that point, but the pieces are all really good still, and the ice is really good, so we're very happy.
What can you tell me about the different artists that are here for this event?
Well, we have 3 artists from Winnipeg, Chris Pankow, Corby Pierce, and Larry McFarland. Corby Pierce and Larry McFarland travel all over the world. They're renowned ice artists. Chris Pankow is a local artist who's done a lot of work in snow, and he's very good at ice as well, it turns out. And then we have Brian MacArthur from Red Deer, Alberta. He and Chris Pankow have collaborated in the past. And then we have Victor Degadan. He's originally from the Philippines, but he works in Florida now in the culinary industry. And he's also a renowned ice artist.
How long has this been going on? What are any future plans you might have?
Well, we're going to grow this into, a major international ice competition. We have this incredible resource. The ice that comes out of our river is really, really, really good. We do normally have cold winters, so we're looking forward to winters in the future where we have an opportunity to really celebrate winter as opposed to sitting in the drizzle. So the idea is to grow it and to have more sculptures down here and really to fill these civic spaces and encourage people to come down and enjoy our downtown. I think it's really critical, the work that Downtown Biz is doing to activate the downtown. The businesses around here, True North Square, BGO, they've all contributed to the activation of these kinds of places. First of all, they built them, and now we're trying to fill them with people. We've got to remember that winter is really important and the cold weather is really important. I know some people are enjoying the warm-ish weather, but our ecosystem, our environment needs the cold, and we certainly prosper when we have proper cold here. So just enjoy the winter, be active, get outside, and enjoy the spaces and places we have.
That was Peter Hargraves from Sputnik Architecture speaking with Radio-Canada's Maid Godard. The sculptures will be on display at True North Square until the 11th, if they last that long. And you can vote for your favorite. You can find more information at the Downtown Biz website. That's downtownwinnipegbiz.com.
All over Turtle Island, host Rosanna Deerchild welcomes you to Unreserved.
Indigenous peoples are retelling history through an Indigenous lens.
Unreserved, celebrating 10 years, looking back at how far we've come, and looking forward to the journey ahead.
How do we keep the story going?
Unreserved with Rosanna Deerchild. Now at a new time, Sunday afternoon at 2:30 in Newfoundland, 3 Pacific, 4 Mountain, and on demand on CBC Listen.
Just about 20 minutes after 6 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Winnipeg's own Andrina Turan is taking her music up to Churchill for that town's own Winterruption Festival. It's a 3-day event filling the northern town with live music, workshops, comedy, and more. A collection of Winnipeg artists will be playing the event starting this Thursday. And from Andrina, this is Winter Nights.
May the roots we grow together twist together with such grace and hold us high when we're about to drown, and it all feels like it's crashing down, crashing down. Oh, long winter nights fade into warm summer days, blazing on the portion till the snow flies again. Watch the sunrise with my baby, hear the wind telling us stories, and find the colors that are missing someday.
Playing Churchill's Winterruption Festival this weekend. That was Winnipeg's own Andrina Turan with Winter Nights. 23 minutes after 6 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, in for Marcy Marcusa. World Cancer Day was marked yesterday across the globe, and the World Health Organization took the opportunity to warn that the global burden is rising. We're seeing a growing need internationally for cancer-related services, and in Canada, cancer remains a leading cause of death. Joining us now is Erica Nicholson, Vice President of Cancer Systems and Innovation at Partnership Against Cancer. The group was founded by the federal government just over 15 years ago to steward the Canadian strategy for cancer control. Good morning, Erica.
Good morning, Emily.
So tell us about the impact of cancer on Canadians.
Cancer is a significant impact. I can't imagine anyone in this country who hasn't been impacted either directly, personally, or had a loved one be diagnosed with cancer. In fact, our statistics show that we estimate 2 in 5 people will receive a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. And unfortunately, 1 in 4 people in Canada will lose their lives to cancer. That's about 240 people every day dying from cancer in Canada.
Wow, that's astonishing. And so what's the toughest form of cancer to treat?
Cancer, we talk about it as though it's a disease, but in reality, it's a family of over 100 diseases that each perform and behave differently and have different treatments. So that complexity in itself makes cancer a tricky disease to treat. But if I look specifically at lung cancer, which is the leading cause of cancer death in Canada, unfortunately, lung cancer has generally had lower survival rates, right? But I'm really pleased that what we're finding now, of course, there's been new treatments that are improving lung cancer survival and treatment, but also we've got a new way to screen for this disease, to find it early. And we're working with partners right now across the country to roll out lung cancer screening programs for people who might be at high risk for this disease. So I'm hopeful that, yes, while the cancers can be difficult to treat, that rolling out this new screening program will make an impact on our cancer rates in the country.
Mm-hmm. And Canada has recently made gains in preventing and treating cancer. Where has that happened?
Absolutely. And so, united by the Canadian Strategy for Cancer Control, one of those key goals is so that fewer people develop cancer. And so we're seeing gains, for example, in lung cancer screening programs being rolled out, but also around, I'll say, cervical cancer. Together, we work with partners to create an action plan to eliminate cervical cancer in Canada. And so we're seeing great work around getting HPV, the human papillomavirus, which causes the majority of cervical cancer cases, HPV immunization rates being boosted across the country. And we're working with partners to move to HPV-based screening for cervical cancer. With those 2 things in play, I'm confident we can eliminate the cancer in Canada.
Mm. And so what are some of the biggest barriers to accessing care?
The barriers vary. We're a large country, but we have data that shows if you live on low income, if you live in a rural and remote community, if English, for example, is not your first language, if you're a First Nations, Inuit, or Métis, if you're a member of a racial arts or other community, you may have poorer cancer outcomes.
And so this year, World Cancer Day took place under the theme, Close the Care Gap. What are the gaps here in Canada?
Well, all of those factors, like being on low income, rural, remote, they show up in different ways. Who we are and where we live affects how we can interact with the cancer system and frankly, how easy it is to interact with the cancer system. And so we're working with partners right now to close those gaps by putting new models of care in place. So how do we bring care closer to the community? How do we make care culturally safer? How do we reduce some of those other barriers? We're working with partners to get better and more timely data so that we can, we know kind of in a big way what the gaps are, how can we understand those gaps more? And importantly, move into creating solutions and co-creating those solutions with those communities who've been underserved by the cancer system.
Mm-hmm. And tell us more about the kind of work being done here in Canada to address that.
It's a very exciting time. And so I'll give you an example of some projects. Certainly, we're working on pilots for getting not only HPV-based screening, which is important for eliminating cervical cancer, but self-screening. So this is a new way that we can be screened for cervical cancer that doesn't necessarily mean we have to have a health professional do it. We can take our own samples. And so that will decrease a lot of barriers for people. We're working to see how we can improve access to palliative care for people who are experiencing houselessness or who are vulnerably housed. We're bringing partners together to understand how we can improve the data collection systems in this country so that the information flows better, that we can make more timely decisions, and we can understand some communities that maybe we need to focus on more to close those gaps. And we're also working and supporting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis on self-determined cancer strategies so that they're articulating their priorities, and then, as appropriate, we can support moving those priorities forward. So it's an exciting time, and the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer is here to help drive that progress with partners from coast to coast to coast towards these goals.
Thanks for joining us and telling us more about all this work being done, Erica.
Thank you.
Erica Nicholson is Vice President of Cancer Systems and Innovation at Partnership Against Cancer. That group was founded by the federal government and stewards the Canadian Strategy for Cancer Control. Well, it is just coming up on local news time. Still to come in the next half hour of the show, the country's top financial regulator has the latest on how businesses are doing when it comes to debt. We'll hear more from the CBC Business Desk on that. And pop into the grocery store for milk, maybe eggs. You're trying to get in and out. Do you go to the cashier or do you go to a self-checkout kiosk? We'll hear more about that coming up after the news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, there is a fog advisory for southern Manitoba. It is 0 in Winnipeg right now. Not too much fog in the city, but we do have some drizzle this morning. We'll see a southerly breeze and a high today of 3. The assault of a Winnipeg transit driver on Saturday is causing anger and frustration. Police say a 29-year-old man attacked the driver on a route in northeast Winnipeg after he refused to take him to a street that wasn't on the route. Union President Chris Scott says bus drivers in Winnipeg face all sorts of harassment.
Ranges from racial remarks being yelled at an operator, theft of possessions of another rider, or full-out assaults on either the riding public or the operators. It appears that people feel empowered, that there are no repercussions to their actions. So we need to let them know that this level of violence will not be tolerated.
Scott hopes the upcoming implementation of the community safety team helps reduce these incidents. The team is on track to be out on the streets by the end of the month. Some First Nations leaders call for change in the way accommodations are booked for medical appointments. It comes after a recent viral video showed a First Nations woman zip-tied in the lobby of the Marlborough Hotel in downtown Winnipeg. The Marlborough is one of 31 establishments on a list by Indigenous Services Canada where First Nations people can stay while they're in Winnipeg for health appointments. But another place on that list is doing things differently. CBC's Emily Brass takes a look.
This is where our cafeteria is.
Families are sitting around tables enjoying a hot lunch at Burnell Place. The lodge opened last October in Winnipeg. On the clock.
We have phones in the rooms.
Gwen Flatt says she and a partner started the business because of what happened to her as a young patient from St. Teresa Point in a big city for the first time.
You start feeling a little lost. So we wanted to make it feel like they don't have to worry about anything.
The staff are all First Nations. Most of them speak Ojibwe, Cree, Oji Cree, or Saulteaux. Mary Bear works at the front desk. She helps guests navigate the city and the medical system.
I talk to the doctors, I talk to the nurses, and as well as our patients. We told my sisters everything is going to be okay. We're here for you.
Indigenous Services says it's open to working with First Nations on more culturally appropriate lodging like Burnell Place. Emily Brass, CBC News, Winnipeg.
5 former and current NHLers make their first appearance in a London, Ontario court today. The members of Canada's 2018 World Junior Hockey team are facing sexual assault charges. This afternoon, London police will also update the public on the case. You can hear more on this story as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. An ethics professor says people with mental illness have a right to end their life with dignity through medically assisted dying. Neil MacArthur at the University of Manitoba says Maid for mental illness belongs in a broader mental health strategy.
Politicians say over and over again, well, this has to be part of a comprehensive mental health strategy, and then they don't produce a comprehensive mental health strategy. It can only take so long. They can't just keep pushing this and pushing this and pushing this and saying, well, we need safeguards. Yes, we need safeguards, but you've had years now.
A Manitoba woman tells CBC she feels discriminated against by the delay of Maid's expansion and is now considering suicide. Maid was supposed to be expanded in March, but that has now been put off for at least 3 years. Winnipeg is releasing its draft budget Wednesday, and organizations have their wish lists ready. Among them, the Manitoba Heavy Construction Association. President Chris Lawrence wants to see signs of a bigger economic partnership between the city and the province.
It's a transition year, challenging, encouraging, supporting leadership from the Premier and the Mayor to develop a new financial model that focuses on economic growth. That's the kind of message I would love to see emanate from the tabling of the budget.
Other organizations tell CBC News they would like to see more funds going towards libraries and Winnipeg's downtown. Well, after 2 days of intense deliberations, Manitoba's second largest city has approved a new budget. It is the first 4-year budget in Brandon ever. Brandon Chamber of Commerce President Lois Rustin.
Now we begin a very difficult balancing act between helping our businesses and advocating for our businesses as they manage through these increases, as well as holding the city of Brandon accountable in moving ahead into the 2024 budget.
One of the main sticking points was an almost 10% property tax increase in Brandon. Well, 2 Canadian women are among this year's Grammy Awards winners. Montreal singer-songwriter Alison Russell wins the Grammy for Best American Roots Performer for her song Eve Was Black. And the legendary Joni Mitchell wins Best Folk Album.
I looked at clouds, both sides, from both sides now.
And for the first time in history, Mitchell performed during the Grammys last night with a moving rendition, as you're hearing it there, from both sides now. Joni Mitchell is 80 years old. She performed in a lounge chair with a cane swaying to the music in her hand. And Quebec's Celine Dion made a surprise appearance at the Grammys as well to announce Taylor Swift as winner of Album of the Year. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Sounds like the most iconic Canadian divas were all there.
Seems so, hey? How come we weren't there?
I know. They missed us, Heather. I don't know what's wrong with them. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Newsroom, and you're listening to Information Radio. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa, and our show director, Corey Funk, joins us now with the weather and traffic.
Like you say, speaking of Canadian iconic divas, Corey Funk is here too.
Right. If you want to fall in that category, I'm all for it, Corey.
Yeah, it's a cloudy one out there and foggy. Actually, there's a fog advisory in effect for all of southern Manitoba this morning. That's a thick fog too. Already heard from Thomas on the commuter line. He's got fog and freezing rain right now on Highway 16 around Biscarth, Shoal Lake, Strathclair. So be careful. A little bit slippery as well with that freezing rain going on in that area of the province. But fog pretty much right across the board here in southern Manitoba. In Winnipeg right now, 0 at the Forks, heading for a high of 3 with periods of drizzle today. It's going to dip down to 0 overnight. Looking elsewhere in the province, Brandon, 0, heading for a high of 3. Cloudy for you today. Dauphin, 0, also heading for a high of 3, but you've got a chance of showers today for Dauphin. Thompson, -7, heading for a high of -1. You can expect about 2 to 4 centimeters of snow. So weather just kind of all over the place here in the province this morning. Cold spot. It's still winter up into Dooley Lake, -22, and Gretna is our hot spot at 1 degree. As I mentioned before, on the commuter line, foggy out there pretty much right across the province. So do look out for that. I'd love to get some updates from folks about what they're seeing or not seeing because of this fog. Here in the city, though, if you see any potholes showing up, very curious about if how many potholes are showing up now with that freeze thaw. Give me a call on the CBC commuter line. Let me know what you're seeing out there. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
Good morning, everyone. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Marcusa. Time now for some business news. Crystalie Ramlakan is here with the CBC Business Report. Good morning, Crystalie.
Hi, good morning, Emily.
Good morning. So the country's top financial regulator has the latest on how businesses are doing when it comes to debt. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so business insolvencies jumped by more than 41% last year. And the Canadian Association of Insolvency and Restructuring Professionals says the numbers mark the sharpest increase in 36 years of records. So the chief economist for the Conference Board of Canada, that's a think tank that analyzes economic trends, says we're seeing a very tough economic climate for a lot of businesses. Profits have gone down, and many small businesses missed that deadline for partial forgiveness last month on their government pandemic loans. Now, he says there may be more job losses in the coming months. But if things start to unravel, there is still room for the Bank of Canada to lower interest rates, which could help. Now, consumer insolvencies rose by 23% last year. People are facing a combination of a high cost of living, mounting credit card debt, and elevated interest rates for loans and mortgages. Credit card debt reached an all-time high of $11 billion in the fall, an increase of 16% annually. But though the insolvency numbers are more or less in line with 2019 levels, during the pandemic, bankruptcies plunged to record lows, with the government introducing financial supports and some mortgage payments being deferred.
Interesting. And meanwhile, one business that has been doing quite well is Meta, the parent company for Facebook and Instagram. What's going on with that?
Yes, that's right. So Meta stock rose 20% on Friday, adding $197 billion to the company's valuation, which is now $1.22 trillion. So it's the most market value any U.S. company has ever gained in a single day. Now, there were a few things behind that. Meta released a very good earnings report last week showing it had tripled its profits, and it recorded its fastest rate of revenue growth since 2021, which could indicate a comeback in online advertising. But, Emily, 2 years ago, the tech company was in a completely different situation. It had the largest single-day crash in stock market history, wiping out about $250 billion in value. And CEO Mark Zuckerberg was burning money trying to make that metaverse thing happen. But he decided to make some major changes and labeled 2023 the year of efficiency. And, well, he did that by reducing expenses by consolidating offices and laying off 22% of workers.
That's a lot of workers, huh? Meanwhile, the federal government has unveiled a new online tool to track representation and pay disparity. What can you tell us?
Yes, so it's launched a website to better illustrate how women, visible minorities, people with disabilities, and Indigenous people are represented and paid at federally regulated private sector employers. So this new site is called Equivision, and it compares data on representation rates and pay gaps. Labor Minister Seamus O'Regan says the tool can shine a light on where representation can be improved. And this information comes from data submitted by these workplaces with more than 100 workers as part of their annual reporting under the Employment Equity Act. Now, individual employee information, though, including salaries, are not included. So far, it shows in the banking sector, Indigenous people make up just 1.5% of employees, but are 4% of our population. And in response to that, the Canadian Bankers Association says banks are dedicated to partnering with government and schools to try to cultivate talent among underrepresented groups.
Okay. And before you go, Crystal Lee, what's happening in the markets this morning?
So in Europe, markets are slightly higher, even as investors digest the head of the U.S. Federal Reserve saying interest rates will probably go down slower than the market expects. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, most markets are lower after fears of higher for longer interest rates. Japan is up, Shanghai and Hong Kong are both down. Oil is down 48 cents to 71.78 US per barrel. Gold is down 12.30 to $2,041.40 US per ounce, and the dollar is down 0.16 of a cent to 74.12 cents US.
Thank you, Crystal Lee.
Thanks, Emily.
That was CBC's Crystal Lee Ramlakan with the business news. 43 minutes after 6 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page and on the CBC Listen app. Montreal folk singer Alison Russell has landed her first Grammy Award. The musician picked up Best American Roots Performance for this next song. Have a listen. This is Alison Russell's Eve Was Black.
Eve was black, haven't you heard? The mother of all was dark and good. Eve was black, didn't you know? Is that why you hate my black skin so? Is that why you hate my black skin so? Does it remind you of what you lost? Do you hate or do you lust? Do you despise or do you yearn to return, to return, to return back to the motherland, back to the garden, back to your black skin, back to the innocence, back to the shine you lost when you enslaved your kin? Try to touch my hair? Do you hope to find a blessing there? Why do you try to keep me down? Do you hope to sow this barren ground with my black blood, black magic blood, with my black blood, black magic blood? Do I remind you of what you lost? Do you hate or do you lust? Do you despise or do you yearn to return, to return, to return back to the motherland, back to the garden, back to your black skin, back to the innocence, back to the shine you lost when you enslaved your kin? Back to the shine you lost when you enslaved your kin. Oh my sister, oh my brother, oh my mother, oh my father, oh my cousin, oh my pale kin. Can't wash this sin, can't wash this sin, can't wash this sin with my black blood.
With the song that won her first Grammy Award, that was Eve Was Black by Montreal folk singer Alison Russell. 6:47, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. About a quarter of the world's population feels lonely. That's according to a recent Meta Gallup survey. And during these winter months, those feelings can weigh heavily on us. Cross Country Checkup asked callers yesterday, when was the last time you felt lonely and what helped you get through it? Here's what some of the callers shared with host Ian Hannah-Mansing.
My primary statement I wanted to make for people, if they are feeling lonely, reach out. It's not always easy to get help, but sometimes even just reaching out whether it doesn't have to be medical initially unless you need it. It can be family, it can be friends. And I guess the other thing that helped me through some really lonely times, staying active, getting involved in community, that makes such a big difference.
My wife died suddenly in August of 2022. We had just moved to a new community. I didn't know my neighbors. I've been an organic regenerative farmer for over 50 years. And I built 6 raised beds in my backyard of my new property. And by spring, I was able to provide my neighbors with fresh vegetables. And that was a way of building bridges and getting to know them. Some of them had children, and the children were so excited that, matter of fact, they want to greet me every time they saw me after that.
I'm recently widowed. It's been almost 2 years. So now being by myself, I've had to be proactive, and having a really good grief counselor, she put me in touch with the Red Cross, who has what's called the Friendly Calls program. They're not therapists or counselors, they're friends. It's kind of nice to know that there's someone to connect with through, I guess, shared experiences. I chatted to a lady last week. She's a widow as well. You know, we have a bit of a connection and we get to know each other, and I think it's wonderful.
About a year and a half ago, I adopted a small rescue dog, which has been, it's actually done wonders for assuaging loneliness. It has, brought the companionship to my life. Also, it gets me out in my neighborhood every day. When I would walk in my neighborhood before, like, nobody talks to you. And I've met more neighbors and connected with more people, made friends through dog walking groups. It has just been a real godsend, really, for me for creating some connection to my community, which has been amazing.
Those were callers on Cross Country Checkup yesterday with host Ian Hannah-Mansing. They were responding to the questions, when was the last time you felt lonely and what helped you get through it? You can download the Checkup podcast on the CBC Listen app or at cbc.ca/checkup. Well, it's 9 minutes before 7 o'clock. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. 0 degrees right now at the Forks, going up to a high of +3 with some periods of drizzle today. I'm Emily Brass filling in for Marcy Marcusa. Well, you pop into the grocery store for some milk, maybe some eggs, and you're trying to get in and out with your handful of items. And if you're like me, you have too many things in your arms while you're waiting. You go to pay and you're faced with the choice between a long line for the cashier or a self-checkout kiosk that malfunctions with every other customer. And again, sometimes that's me. And with the ever-increasing presence of tech, automated checkout systems are everywhere. And faced with rising theft and customer frustration, many companies are rethinking their use. To dig into that, we've reached Marvin Ryder, an associate professor of marketing and entrepreneurship at McMaster University. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how have expectations around self-checkout systems panned out on both the customer and corporate side?
Right. So, we university professors, we like grading things. So I would give this technology a B+. A B+. When we survey consumers about this, we find that between 2/3 and 3/4 of consumers are satisfied with the technology. Now, that's not a great score. It's not a perfect score, but it says that as a first go-round, we've got a lot of things right here. And when we talk to the retailers themselves, what it does is allows them to, yes, eliminate some staff. That brings their fixed costs down, and that reduces some of the pressure they have to keep increasing prices as it goes. So it's kind of a win-win at this stage in the game. Not that it couldn't be better, but as a B+, a lot of good things involved.
A lot of people would be happy with a B+. What have we seen in terms of the pros and cons of this technology?
Well, I think the biggest pro is that you are in charge of your process. So use your example. You've got those eggs and you've got that milk, and you get to the checkout counter, and there's this person ahead of you who's doing their whole week's shopping. It's going to be 15 minutes for them to get through, and then when they do get through, they're fishing in the bottom of the purse for a coupon or some coins or whatever it is, and you're tapping your foot and you're saying, why does this always happen to me? Well, if I'm at the self-checkout, then I'm involved. Now, even if it doesn't go well, even if there's a mistake of some sort, like your loyalty card won't scan, and you've got to get some assistance. Nonetheless, I am being dealt with right now, and I love that a lot, that I'm in charge. The biggest con to the whole thing has been an increase in theft. Now, there's two kinds of theft, what I'll call inadvertent theft. So there you are at the checkout counter, and you've got 12 items, and you're trying to get them out of the basket and put them into a bag and scan them, boop, 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 and suddenly you only scan 11 of the 12. That's an accident. Maybe you notice it. Maybe you don't notice it till you get home. Maybe you don't even notice it then. Then there's also purposeful theft. This is where people set out from the beginning to use the self-checkout technology to avoid paying. So I've got 10 cans of Red Bull. What happens if I only scan 9 of them? Oh, nobody seems to say anything. Great, I'll just take that discount and go with me. So there are problems, and I can draw a parallel to self-service gas stations. Once upon a time when that technology was first deployed, you would pull up, you would let the person know that you're there, they would turn on the pump, you would fill your tank, and then you would go into the store and pay. The problem there was that some people would fill up their tank and then drive off without paying. So today, when we deploy this, you go and you prepay before you even start pumping the gas. And in that way, if you drive out, they still got your cash as it goes. Now, I'm not saying the future is going to be prepayment of groceries, but as we improve this technology over time, you're going to find ways to eliminate both the hiccups that happen and make it smoother for consumers, and at the same time reduce the chance for theft.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the ways that you might fix those issues and also address that customer frustration you touched on?
Yeah, and I hate to do this to you, but it's probably going to involve artificial intelligence, AI, the deployment of that in stores. Now, I'll just tell you a quick story. I went to Lithuania last year. This is a country whose population is smaller than that of Toronto. I walked around the downtown core, and as I was heading back to my hotel, I was thirsty, so I thought I'd stop at a variety store. To go into the variety store, I had to tap a credit card to get the door to open, and when I walked into the store, not only were there no other customers in the store, but there were no staff at all. I thought, well, that's kind of weird. So I took a bottle of something to drink, and I got a bag of pretzels, and maybe I got some peanuts. And when I go to leave, there's a computer terminal that says, "This is what you have taken from the shelves. Please confirm." I did. "Do you want to use the same credit card?" I did. And once I had done that and processed the transaction, the door to exit popped open. It was a 100% robotic store. Now, I'm not trying to scare people. I'm not saying that's exactly the future of retail, but deploying artificial intelligence is a way to gather some of these hiccups and make them go away. So in version 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, this will become smoother and smoother and better and better.
Wow, so high tech. So where might the strategy on these machines be heading? Like, in what context are they best suited?
Well, I think as long as we've got UPC codes involved, those are those barcodes that we all took for granted when they were first introduced in the 1970s. But now that those are on everything, then you enable this kind of technology as it goes. Now, again, I understand the biggest concern is often with older consumers, and I'll lump myself in with that, because we like the way it is. I don't want to change. I got my life all worked out. I don't want to change things. But I would remind people that my students at the university don't know what a teller is. They've never been inside a bank. A bank to them is an app on a smartphone that they do all their transactions with. They don't know what a check is. They don't even know what a credit card is. That's all been downloaded onto their phone, and they use their phone to pay for everything. Now, again, I'm not trying to get everyone all upset, but these things evolve over time, and as technologies become better and better established, then we react to them differently. And I think what happens with consumers, and this will include you, that yes, you may have a problem with that machine, but the more times you use the machine, the better you get at it. Your skill level improves, and it goes from there. But it might even be something as simple as that if you use the self-checkout, you get a 1% discount. My feeling is your happiness with that process would go up dramatically if you got 1% off your bill.
Yeah, no kidding, because you are doing some of the work after all.
Right.
So this technology, though, has become such a lightning rod for customer frustration and also for conversations on labor and convenience. Why is that?
Again, I wish I knew exactly. Now, to be clear about this, when we got to self-serve gas stations, we eliminated a job. I'm going to call them a gas jockey, somebody who came out and filled up your tank for you. And those jobs went the way of the dodo, and nobody seemed to be upset. We've automated banks, and most teller positions have pretty much disappeared. No one seemed to be upset, and yet now the line in the sand seems to be cashiers in retail stores. The only thing I can attribute that to is that this was a type of job that a lot of people had at some point in their life, usually earlier in their life, to make a few bucks when they're in high school or in their early 20s. It's not necessarily a career path, but we all did this at some point, and therefore it's a bit of nostalgia to see it go.
No kidding. We've got to let it go, though. Sorry, Marvin.
That's all right.
We're running up on news time, but thank you so much for joining us with your perspectives.
No problem. Thank you.
Marvin Ryder is an associate professor of marketing and entrepreneurship at McMaster University. Heather Wells is in the CBC newsroom with headlines.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg blogger says the city needs to put money into its transit master plan instead of wasting hundreds of millions on road expansion projects. Winnipeg's draft budget comes out on Wednesday. We'll hear more coming up at 7:30.
You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Lots more to come. World Report is coming up next.
City because of a doctor shortage. We'll talk about their concerns and the solutions coming up.
Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. We are waiting to hear from police in London, Ontario. They're expected to give an update this afternoon on the Hockey Canada sexual assault case. It has sent shockwaves throughout Canadian minor hockey leagues. Some of them are now bringing in special trainers to teach consent. The CBC's Kwabena Oduro went to one of those courses in Quebec.
No means no, exactly right. That is the main thing.
Just one of the messages that the Douro minor hockey team revisited during a refresher course on consent. Some players like 15-year-old Sawyer Rial agree the notion of locker room culture needs a shift.
Well, there's a lot of hazing, kind of, I would say, and sometimes it can go a little far. So it's just good to find that line.
The program is a result of a partnership between the league and the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center in Ontario. Players have open conversations about respect, leadership, sex, as well as the use of drugs and alcohol. Former pro rugby player Luke Benvenson leads the workshops. He says many young male athletes question the notion of consent.
These sorts of programs will help prevent these types of ideas. It gives kids an opportunity to intervene with their mates at a level before it gets there.
He says it's important these lessons come from someone players can relate to, and parents agree. Since last year, around 150 people aged 7 to 18 have received the voluntary training. Nearly 95% of the league's players, says Secretary to Minor Hockey, Carrie Rial.
We're building kids that are going to be our citizens of tomorrow, and we want them to be respectful.
These workshops are also offered to teams in the Ontario Hockey League as part of its on-site program to raise awareness and understanding about sexual harassment and assault. And more widely, the workshops are now being offered to players of other sports as well. Kwabena Oduro, CBC News, Montreal.
A trial begins today for a high-ranking former member of the Canadian military charged with sexual assault. Hayden Edmondson was the military's head of human resources. He has pleaded not guilty and denied any wrongdoing. And as Kayla Hansel reports, experts say Canadians should be watching this case.
This is an important case. It's an important case because it's one of the first of many cases that will go be seen under the civilian system.
Megan McKenzie of Simon Fraser University says it's important to put the trial of Hayden Edmondson in context.
A very senior person in HR in charge of determining what happened essentially to individuals who faced sexual misconduct allegations.
Edmondson was charged in 2021 with 1 count of sexual assault and 1 count of committing indecent acts. During his arraignment, court heard the offenses allegedly took place on board HMCS Provider when it was docked at Pearl Harbor in 1991. He is one of several high-profile military members to be accused of sexual misconduct. In the spring of 2022, former Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour called for all cases of alleged sexual assault in the military to be transferred out of the military justice system. Charlotte Duval-Antoine studies gender integration in the Canadian Forces.
There's a lot in the balance right now, in the sense of if he is found guilty, there might be a lot of movement for victims. But if the charges are stayed or he is acquitted, there might be a lot of pushback and resistance to the culture change that the military is currently pursuing.
Edmondson has pleaded not guilty. His lawyer, Brian Greenspan, has said he looks forward to restoring his reputation. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Ottawa.
To Nova Scotia now, where schools are closed across much of the province. It is day 4 of a snowstorm. Some areas have up to 1.5 meters of snow. It is one of the largest snowfalls in Nova Scotia's history. Thousands of homes and businesses have been without power for days. Officials are warning people to stay home if they can. Crews are trying to clear the highways and roads around abandoned cars. And Cape Breton Regional Municipality has declared a state of emergency. Several flights have been cancelled at both the Halifax and Sydney airports. In Chile, people use shovels to scrape up the debris in the coastal city of Viña del Mar. Wildfires started Friday. Flames have burned through the city and surrounding areas. Officials say this could be a case of arson. At least 112 people have been killed, but that number is expected to rise. At least 1,600 people have lost their homes. Human Rights Watch is slamming Beijing for giving a Chinese-Australian writer a suspended death sentence. Yang Hengjun is a pro-democracy blogger. He was arrested on espionage charges in 2019. His trial was held behind closed doors 3 years ago. And this morning, Yang was handed what advocates call an unusually harsh sentence. Elaine Pearson is with Human Rights Watch.
So we actually have very little information about what it is that Yang is alleged to have done. And this really, I think, shines a spotlight on the opaqueness of China's criminal justice system, especially when it comes to national security violations.
In China, a suspended death sentence gives the accused a 2-year reprieve from being executed. After that, it is automatically converted to life in prison. It is used to reduce the number of executions in China without abolishing the death penalty. Last hour, we told you about U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's efforts to secure a deal for the release of Israeli hostages. The term hostage exchange was used. In fact, only Hamas is holding people hostage. International conferences hosted by Canada's Parliament are supposed to be an opportunity to address tough global problems. But last summer, one of those conferences, taxpayers paid much more than expected, and nobody stayed in the hotel rooms. The CBC's Elizabeth Thompson explains.
And I want to welcome you to my city. I embrace all of you. Thank you very much.
When Liberal MP Hetty Fry welcomed delegates to a conference in Vancouver last summer, it was the culmination of years of work. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe's Parliamentary Assembly brought together politicians from across Europe, Canada, and the United States. They talked about things such as Russia's invasion of Ukraine and rising anti-Semitism. But there was a problem.
We had a pretty normal delegate showing, and then for whatever reason, people just didn't turn up.
Instead of the 700 delegates they expected, only 365 attended. On top of that, a third of those who did show up passed on the expensive hotel rooms that had been reserved, staying instead at cheaper hotels. The result? Canadian taxpayers ended up paying for nearly $600,000 worth of luxury hotel rooms the conference never used. Senator Elizabeth Marshall is a former Auditor General for Newfoundland and Labrador.
It's very concerning, especially in the current economic times when people are lined up at food banks.
Peter Julian is NDP House Leader.
Yeah, I'm really disturbed by this. This is a massive deficit.
Conference organizers are already planning changes to prevent things like this happening again, like making delegates who cancelled the last minute pay for their own hotel rooms instead of leaving Canadian taxpayers to foot the bill. Elizabeth Thompson, CBC News, Ottawa.
Last night's Grammy performances featured touching tributes, surprise appearances, and more than a few Canadian celebrities. Freelance reporter Steve Futterman was there, and he has a full report.
Almost everyone predicted it would be a night to showcase women, and that's exactly what the Grammys turned out to be, featuring a group of remarkably talented songwriters and singers who just happened to be women.
And the Grammy goes to Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift won Album of the Year for the 4th time, breaking a record she shared with Frank Sinatra and Stevie Wonder.
All I want to do is keep being able to do this. I love it so much. It makes me so happy.
The surprise of the night was who presented the Grammy to Taylor Swift, Celine Dion, who hasn't performed in over a year as she battles a rare neurological disorder. She received a standing ovation as she walked on stage with her 23-year-old son.
When I say that I'm happy to be here, I really mean it.
Women won all the major awards, but perhaps the most moving moment,
A true Renaissance woman, my hero and yours, Joni Mitchell.
was when 80-year-old Canadian folk legend Joni Mitchell came on stage to perform for the first time ever at the Grammys.
Rose and flows of angel hair.
Her song Both Sides Now was on the album that earned Mitchell her first Grammy in 1969.
I've looked at clouds from both sides now.
Topping the night for Mitchell was another Grammy. She won Best Folk Album for Joni Mitchell at Newport Live. Steve Futterman for CBC News at the Grammy Awards in Los Angeles.
I recall, I really don't know clouds. I really don't know clouds at all.
That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Moons and Junes.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's coming up on the show. A Manitoba woman living with severe mental illness says she's devastated by Ottawa's choice to delay medical assistance in dying for those with conditions like her. She calls it discriminatory, and we'll find out why. We'll also meet a Steinbach teenager who took a school assignment and turned it into a basketball training camp. The idea is to get more girls into sports. We'll hear her story later on Information Radio. And how does social media shape and even enable youth violence? We'll hear from an expert about how online aggression can lead to real-world acts of violence. All that and more coming up on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 7 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the assault of a Winnipeg transit driver on Saturday is causing anger and frustration. Police say a 29-year-old Winnipeg man was attacked the driver on a route in northeast Winnipeg after the driver refused to take him to a street that wasn't on that route. We're going to hear from the union president talking about how bus drivers face all kinds of harassment, so that's coming up. As well, some First Nations leaders are calling for changes in the way accommodations are booked for medical patients. It comes after a recent viral video showed a First Nations woman zip-tied in the lobby of the Marlborough Hotel. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells from our newsroom. And here now with a look at the traffic and the weather is Corey Funk.
Hip, hip, cheerio. Welcome to London.
Well, yes, doesn't it feel that way? London fog.
It kind of feels like it. What's going on? 0 degrees right now, and it is Winnipeg where we are right now.
To be clear.
It is to be clear. When you look outside, you might think otherwise. There is a fog advisory in effect for the entirety of southern Manitoba right now. I've already gotten a call on the commuter line that it's foggy on Highway 16, for example. Very low visibility and some freezing rain as well, actually, in that area around Biscarth, Shoal Lake, Strathclair. So Thomas called and he said that he was going about 90, so about 10 kilometers per hour less, just to kind of stay safe on the road. So be careful out there. Looking at your forecast here, as I said before, 0 right now, heading for a high of 3. Periods of drizzle today, actually, here in Winnipeg. This fog is going to cause near zero visibility this time in the morning. Wind is going to become south 20, gusting to 40 near noon. And then overnight, dipping down to 0. And then looking ahead to the rest of the week, high of 4 on Tuesday, cloudy. High of 3 on Wednesday, cloudy. This is just going to be the theme here. A very cloudy week. ahead. Cloudy and just above zero highs up until
Are
Saturday.
we still in
Sunday.
Manitoba?
I don't know anymore. I don't even know. Yeah, it feels like either we're in Newfoundland or London or
Right.
something like that. Who knows?
Vancouver Island, maybe?
Yes,
Yeah.
could be. Minus, but then we will return to Winnipeg weather.
Oh, no.
On the weekend, at least the long-term forecast right now, minus 10 on Saturday and sunny, which will be very welcome by then, and high of minus 11 on Sunday. So going to get more seasonal-esque weather by the weekend, turning more wintry again. So, but I'll have more of a regional forecast for you in about half an hour or so. Right now at the Forks, sitting at 0. And if you see something going on out there on the highways, on the roads, bike lanes, sidewalks, which are very slippery, I can tell you on the way in this morning on my walk, give me a call and I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there. 204-788-3093.
Coming up on 7:15, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page and the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Kathy Van Buskirk lives with complex and debilitating mental health disorders. She's had 12 shock treatments, cognitive behavior therapy, and many counseling sessions, but nothing has worked. It's caused her so much grief and pain to the point where she says she's attempted to die by suicide 3 times. She was hoping medical assistance in dying or Maid would help end her suffering on peaceful terms, but the federal government introduced legislation last week that would delay expansion of the program to people suffering solely from severe mental illness. Van Buskirk says the delay is exclusionary and discriminatory.
You know, it's been 5 years now that the medication has just completely stopped working. You know, he tried everything, every combination of medication, every antipsychotic, everything. And then I did 12 shock treatments and 12 ketamine infusions where you go into the hospital and they infuse ketamine into your body. And I did cognitive behavior therapy, tons of counseling, exposure therapy to try and get me out of the house because I refused to leave the house. It was very difficult. Nothing worked. I phoned the crisis line. I had to phone quite a bit. And I had 3 suicide attempts. From there, they got me finally physically well, and then I went to the psychiatric ward for a week. Of course, through all this, I had to quit the job that I absolutely loved. I was recreation at a nursing home. I loved doing things for the residents and thinking up fun things to do all the time. I can't even read now because I can't concentrate. And I used to paint, and I can't do that anymore. My brain just won't concentrate.
What do your days look like? Like, what would yesterday have been like when you kind of got to psych yourself up to go to, like, the dentist?
Oh, they're terrible. Like, I start getting anxious, like, days before I know I have to go somewhere. Like, I just lay in bed with anxiety. A lot of times I'm crying and I'm hysterical because I just can't be out. Like, I just don't want people to see me. And I would shower, come downstairs, have a cigarette, and then I'll have to go back up and shower. And this could be like sometimes like 10 times a day. And I have to just go lay in bed for the rest of the day.
I guess looking at Maid and seeing potentially that the approval was possible, even though now it's delayed by 3 years.
Yeah, when I found that, I think I knew about Maid for physical because we had it at the nursing home and the residents could apply for it. And then I found a number and I phoned it and I reached Maid for mental health, but they told me that it wasn't going to happen till last year. And then they gave me the Manitoba Maid number and they said, yeah, I've been in their file and they have to approve you. Like, you have to see doctors. Like, it's not just someone on a whim that doesn't want to live. You have to see a couple of doctors and social workers, and they actually assess you for a couple of months. it gave me hope. My suffering would finally come to an end. I wouldn't have to do it myself. I wouldn't have to put my family through the trauma of more suicide attempts, and I could die at peace with my family by my side, you know, just like any other Canadian who has a serious illness. I feel that the government's discriminating against me. It's bad enough that there's still so much stigma surrounding mental illness. The government's making it even worse by not recognizing and not including us. And then there was a quote from the Brandon Sun, the Alberta government, for example, says it's calling for an indefinite delay because it doesn't believe that offering a medically assisted death to someone with a mental disorder belongs in the healthcare system at all. Well, where do we belong? We have a medical condition. I just felt that this is plain discrimination. My illness causes me grievous amounts of pain and suffering, just as someone who suffers a physical one. But at least they could be offered Maid. But my suffering is indefinite, and my government wants to prolong that suffering. And just as myself, who can no longer endure, are going to end up taking their lives in their own hands again and putting their families through more trauma. I wrote several letters, including the Justice Minister. He quoted in the Winnipeg Sun, and none of these people on the board ever called to talk to real people to see what's going on. And Stan Kuchar, who's also a psychiatrist and was on the board to give evidence, he asked if any of these people ever called me to ask me what my life was like and what mental illness was like. And no one ever called.
So that's 36 years of experience you speak to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I heard that, like all last year, I just kept saying, okay, I can make it another year. You know, okay, I can do 7 months. Oh, 6 months to go. I can hang on. You know, totally expecting it to go through. So it was a really hard blow when I heard they weren't going to do it. And because that's the only thing that was keeping me going, knowing that I'd finally end all this pain and suffering. And then when I found out they weren't going to do it, I was heartbroken and just devastated because I don't know what I'm going to do. Why do other Canadians get to have their life end in peace, and where my life is going to be ending in trauma again for me and my family?
That was Kathy Van Buskirk on Ottawa's decision to delay expansion of Maid to people suffering solely from severe mental illness. She was speaking with CBC's Chelsea Kemp. And for more info on the story, visit our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. And if you're experiencing suicidal thoughts or having a mental health crisis, there is help out there. Contact the Manitoba Suicide Prevention and Support Line toll free at 1-877-435-7170. That's 877-HELP-170.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
7:22, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, still to come on the show, we'll take a look at how social media can accelerate violence among youth.
Effectively, social media becomes a megaphone for the argument that you would have with a friend or with a group. And what happens is that when you make a comment that disrespects an individual or a group, then you also have other individuals, some for whom you may know, some for whom you may not know, who can all then comment and add to perhaps what could have been a simple argument now becomes a big argument that folks then have to defend outside of social media. So that kind of pounding on effect really accelerates an argument that happens on social media.
We'll hear from an expert who explains how disputes online can turn violent in the real world and what can be done to intervene. That's coming up at 7:50. But first, time for some music. You could say that country music runs in Katie St. Germain's veins. Her grandfather is legendary in the country world and a former CBC host, Ray St. Germain. Now, Katie's making a name for herself, winning Emerging Artist of the Year honors at last year's Manitoba Country Music Awards. Here's her first song of this year. It's called The Day Gets Too Long.
I wake up in the morning, pour myself a coffee, and think of all the things I'm gonna do. I'm gonna hit the gym before it's 9 a.m. Hell, I might even catch up on the news. Not gonna drink, not gonna smoke, not gonna keep checking my phone for a message that he'll probably never send. But the day gets too long, and the night just gets longer, and I try to be strong, but time's always stronger. Those seconds turn to minutes, turn to hours, dragging on, and the day is too long. I'm good at staying busy until a memory hits me, and then I'm right back where I started from. I have a drink, I have a smoke, I text someone I used to know, just when I think I'm getting good at being alone. The day gets too long, and the night just gets longer, and I try to be strong, but time's always stronger. Seconds turn to minutes, turn to hours, dragging on, and the day is too long. When the sun is rising, you can find me in my bed.
That was Manitoba's own Katie St. Germain with The Day Gets Too Long. 25 minutes after 7 o'clock, time for sports news. Scott Reguer joins us from the CBC Sports Desk. Good morning, Scott.
Hey there, Emily.
So 5 former players on Canada's 2018 World Junior Hockey team are set for their first court hearing today. What are some of the key things to watch for?
Well, firstly, Emily, will the players, Michael McLeod, Dylan Dubé, Alex Fermenton, Cal Foote, and Carter Hart, be tried as a group or individually? If it's individually, then there will be separate trials, which will take much longer to work through. In fact, lawyers who've spoken with CBC say that process could take up to 2.5 years. Another question is whether the players will be tried by a judge or by a judge and jury. If any one of the defendants requests a jury, then that's how the case will be tried. Meantime, NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, Emily, was asked whether he thinks we're going to see the players on the ice in the foreseeable.
All of them either don't have contracts or their contracts will expire at the end of this season. As a personal matter, if I were them, I would be focusing on defending themselves, assuming the charges come down, and I would be surprised if they're playing while this is pending.
4 of the players, excluding Formanton, are under contract with NHL teams until the end of this season. They are currently being on paid leave from their clubs. And by allowing their contracts to expire rather than terminating them for any reason, the NHL avoids challenges from the Players' Union. So London Police have scheduled a press conference for 1 o'clock Central Time this afternoon. In the meantime, you can read more about the story on our website.
And over to the NHL now. The Jets made a big trade over the weekend?
They did, and Sean Monahan is expected to play for them tomorrow night in Pittsburgh against the Penguins, Emily. Monahan, a veteran forward, acquired from Montreal for first and third round draft picks, and judging by what we've seen in practice, it looks like he's going to center the second line between Nick Ehlers and Cole Perfetti. On his way to practice, Monahan says he's been as nervous as he's been in his entire NHL career, but that he's looking forward to being a Jet.
It's a great place to play. I mean, I loved every time I played in Winnipeg. And as a player, all you want to do is have a chance to play in the playoffs. And I think going to have a good chance here. And, I mean, try and push and go far on a good run. So, I mean, and playing in a Canadian market doing that, it makes it that much more special.
13 goal scorers so far with the Habs. Solid defensive player, great on faceoffs. A lot of check marks when you talk about Sean Monahan, Emily. And I like the fact that the Jets did business this early on, this far in advance of March's trade deadline, because prices only increase as you get more desperate leading up to that deadline. It also gives them time to acclimatize to the Jets system. So we'll see Sean Monahan more likely than not in the Jets lineup tomorrow in Pittsburgh.
All right. Well, welcome to Winnipeg, Sean. And finally, over to soccer. What are your takeaways from yesterday's FIFA announcements?
That John Bon Jovi is going to be happy, Emily.
Yeah.
FIFA announced the next World Cup final is going to be held in his home state of New Jersey. Bon Jovi grew up a big Leeds United supporter. Didn't know that before I did a little bit of research. As for the opening match of the World Cup, it'll be held in Mexico City's iconic Azteca Stadium. Then there's the news around the matches to be held in Canada, 13 in all, the first of which will be played at BMO Field in Toronto. That will involve the Canadian team, which will play its next two matches at BC Place in Vancouver. Vancouver, Emily, actually gets more matches than Toronto, 7 versus 6, which is understandable because the stadium's not only bigger, it's much, much nicer. In a perfect world for Canada, the team will go on a long run, and if it does, it'll play a further 2 playoff games, knockout round matches in Vancouver at BC Place. So following these FIFA announcements, odd makers have made Canada an 85-1 shot to win the World Cup. So living on a prayer.
Oh, my gosh.
Indeed.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Scott.
You betcha.
And that was Scott Reguer from the CBC Sports Desk. The news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 7:30. It's a bit of a gray start to Monday in Winnipeg. We're at 0 right now. Periods of drizzle today, a high again of 3, and there is once again a fog advisory for pretty much all of southern Manitoba this morning. The head of Winnipeg's transit union is angry after a driver was assaulted on Saturday. It happened on a route in northeast Winnipeg. The driver managed to stop the bus and let other passengers off, but he wasn't able to get off. Union President Chris Scott says that is a big concern.
I commend the operator for his fast actions in ensuring that his riders were safe, but unfortunately he was trapped in the driver's compartment and subjected to being assaulted. The only option, which some drivers have had to take, is to jump out the window. And if he was driving down the street, who knows what vehicle is going to pass by if he attempted to do that.
Police say the 39-year-old driver has upper body injuries. A 29-year-old man now faces charges for assault and uttering threats. The Marlborough Hotel has been getting a lot of attention after a widely shared video showed a young First Nations woman zip-tied in the hotel lobby while security waited for police. Officers are investigating, and the hotel is closed. The Marlborough is one of 31 establishments on an Indigenous Services Canada list where First Nations people can stay while in Winnipeg for health services. Angela Levasseur is chief of Nissequawesik Cree Nation north of Thompson. She says the incident highlights problems with some of the hotels on that list.
There's no consideration for the safety of our people, especially our women, our girls, our Two-Spirit relatives. It's just, where can we save money? Knowing full well that many of these hotels are downtown, which is dangerous. A lot of them have cockroaches, bed bugs. They're filthy.
Indigenous Services Canada says it books hotels based on availability. It says people can call 24/7 and speak with a First Nations agent if they want to relocate. And it says people can also find their own accommodations and be reimbursed. The 5 former World Junior Hockey players charged in a sexual assault case in London, Ontario, are set to appear in court today. Dylan Dubé, Cal Foote, Alex Formanton, Carter Hart, and Michael McLeod were charged with sexual assault late last month, stemming from an incident at a hotel in 2018. Lawyers for the players have said their clients will defend themselves against the allegations. You can hear more national and international news on World Report at 8. An ethics professor is calling for a broader conversation on medically assisted dying for the treatment of mental illness. The University of Manitoba's Neil MacArthur says Maid for mental illness can be tricky from an ethical standpoint, but should still be an option.
Not to say that people who have mental illnesses lose their capacity for autonomy or lose their capacity for decision making, but it does affect how they view the future, how they view their lives. People should have access to Maid, but it cannot happen until we have a better system for supporting them.
Maid was supposed to be expanded for mental illness in March, but that now has been put off for at least 3 years. A Winnipeg blogger says this city needs to put money into its transit master plan instead of wasting hundreds of millions on road expansion projects. Michael Durand-Wood writes about municipal issues on his blog, Dear Winnipeg. He says the city needs to think about the long-term costs of any spending decisions in its upcoming budget.
What happens when we build a piece of infrastructure, for example, whether it's a road, a pool, whatever it is, it not only costs money in the year you build it, but it also commits you to future costs in future operating budgets.
Winnipeg's draft budget will be released on Wednesday, and it was a weekend of intense deliberations in Brandon, but Manitoba's second largest city has now approved its first ever 4-year budget. Lois Rustin is president of the Brandon Chamber of Commerce.
4-year cycle is a much easier and more digestible way for our entire community to plan for any increases and to understand what the city's financial plan will be going forward.
One of the main sticking points was an almost 10% property tax increase in Brandon. Rustin says that could add challenges some businesses are already facing. There was a surprise at last night's Grammy Awards. It wasn't Taylor Swift winning Album of the Year. It was who announced that win.
When I say that I'm happy to be here, I really mean it from my heart.
Celine Dion, who has limited her public appearance of late due to a rare neurological disorder. Another Quebecer had a big night as well. Montreal-born singer-songwriter Alison Russell winning for Best American Roots Performance for her song Eve Was Black. Billie Eilish, Victoria Monet, and Miley Cyrus were also big winners. All last night's Grammy highlights are on our website. Just head to cbc.ca. cbcnews.ca. And if you want Manitoba news, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
A lot of wins for the women last night, Heather.
It was a big night and a lot of performances.
Oh, yeah. I wish I'd seen them. I went to bed early because I was getting up so early to come here, but I can always check them out later online.
Yeah, you'll want to do that. They were great.
Thank you so much, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells, who joined us from the newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Marcusa. And joining us now with a look at the traffic and weather is Corey Funk.
There's a song from Newfoundland. I should have pulled it, actually, but it's called On a Gray Foggy Day, Bum 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 Bum, by a Newfoundland band called Shannigannock. Maybe we'll play that later.
Although for us, it's going to be a gray foggy week, I think.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Looking ahead, so today here in Winnipeg, 0. Fog advisory in effect for all of southern Manitoba, pretty much. So if you're hitting the highways today, do be careful out there. 0 degrees, heading for a high of 3 here in Winnipeg. We can actually expect some periods of drizzle later on today, so keep an eye out for that. Maybe bring a raincoat with you. Weird to tell you that in February, but here we are. Looking to other parts of the province here, Brandon, 0, heading for a high of 3. A cloudy day in store for you. Dauphin, 0, heading for a high of 3, with a chance of showers today in Dauphin. Thompson, -7, heading for a high of -1, with some snow. With 2 to 4 centimeters you can expect today in Thompson. Got a call on the commuter line. This was earlier. This was maybe about an hour or so ago. Thomas was seeing some freezing rain on Highway 16 around Biscarth, Shoal Lake, Strathclair. He said it was actually causing a little bit more slippery conditions than normal, so he was going about 90 kilometers per hour instead of 100. Also noticing that fog that we're seeing right across the southern part of the province. So do look out if you're on the highways, particularly Highway 16. If you see anything else going on out there on the highways, on the roads, the sidewalks, seems like the commute, at least here in the city so far, doesn't seem to be too bad or anything. Seems fairly quiet. Roads seem to be doing A-okay, though I feel like I hit at least a couple new potholes this weekend driving around town. So
it does seem like they're cropping up in a lot of those big cracks.
yeah,
as
exactly,
well.
trying to eat your tires. So if there's any ones that you've noticed that are new and you want to tell me about it, give me a call on the CBC commuter line or anything else that you're seeing out there. 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Corey Funk. Well, still to come on the show, how does social media shape and even enable youth violence? We'll hear from an expert on how online aggression can lead to real-world acts of violence. And we've all heard that saying, nobody's perfect, but there's no question that at one point or another, most of us have felt the pressure to be perfect. So we'll hear some tips on how to fight perfectionism. All that still to come on Information Radio. But first, teenage basketball player Peyton Kaler loves playing basketball. In fact, she loves a lot of sports. But here in Canada, most teenage girls don't get into sports. And those who do, more than a third, don't stick with it. That's why Peyton Kaler launched Shoot to Inspire. It's a weekend-long basketball camp for other teenage girls to learn how to play, have some fun, and build confidence. CBC was at Steinbach Regional Secondary School in late January to see how things were going at the camp. Take a listen.
1, 2, 3. Shoot to Inspire!
Oh, kind of got it. We'll learn for next time. Yeah.
It's been really good, yeah. I like doing all the little kind of drills and tricks they have us do.
You get advice for the future if you want to play more sports, and it's just fun.
So it's also nice to have kind of a thing where lots of girls can just kind of get to know each other and have people kind of with there that also are kind of are in the same place.
What's the pass? Perfect, wait in.
Nice. A lot of excitement there. Those were Shoot to Inspire basketball campers Lacey Schroeder and Britton Gruninger talking with CBC in January. And joining us now is Peyton Kaler, the student who put this whole thing together. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Peyton, what inspired you to run Shoot to Inspire?
It's been a running my own basketball camp has been a goal of mine for years since I attended one of my first ones years ago. But I was a part of a global issues class in my semester load called Global Issues, and we were tackling an issue that applied to us and that we could see in our day-to-day lives. And I noticed that girls are having an equal opportunity, especially in sports. So I wanted to kind of put my foot in that one and try and make a difference.
Why do you think it's important for girls to get into sports like you have?
Right. I think sport teaches much more than just dribbling an orange ball down the court. I think there's so many life skills and parts of your character that can be grown through sport in forms of leadership and teamwork. You find your pattern, you find your confidence, and I think it applies to your day-to-day life as well.
So what do you think is stopping some girls from getting into sports?
Opportunities. Growing up in Steinbach, in a bit of a smaller town, there isn't much for us around here. You have to kind of dip your toes into Winnipeg and make that commute, and that's not an option for many families. So to have something local for someone, to have coaches that are female, there's something different about having a female coach that you can just look up to and see. You just relate on a whole nother level in comparison to a male coach. It's just to have the opportunity is something that's lacking.
Mm-hmm. So you've created an opportunity with this 2-day basketball camp, and you're 17 years old. How did you pull this off?
It was a stretch. I mean, I had many generous businesses and families and friends and stuff that wanted to be a part and to help. It was a nonprofit camp, so everything that went into this camp was donated generously, and and I had support of friends, families, and teachers that just wanted to see me thrive with this. I think they saw the importance as well and just wanted to be a part. To put it into reality, I'm currently sitting in the school parking lot heading into my first day of second semester. So as a student, it was a lot to tackle, but it was something that I was super excited to see.
Yeah, great job. So you wanted to teach the basics of basketball at the camp, but you also talked about forming friendships. Tell us about that and why that's important.
Yeah, I mean, having friends that have similar interests to you can only push you to work harder. When you find that relationship that fuels you and wants to see you thrive as well, I mean, it's a pretty sick thing. You get to grow together and experience life together. So yeah, to not only have friends on the same team as you that you grow with, but to have teams on the or friends on the opposing team. It's basketball is a family and it's a small community, especially in communities like Steinbach. So just to be tight with everyone around you is a crazy thing.
Mm-hmm. And you've spoken about, the inequality of sports and the male players getting more opportunities. What did it mean to you to have women and girls taking up space in this way?
It's everything. I often kind of just took a step back and when planning the camp, I was like, what would I have? How would I have thrived with an opportunity like this? Just putting it into my own perspective as a grade 7-8 girl. I watched everyone around me have these opportunities. All these guys in gym class. I was one of maybe two that would play basketball that were girls, and it impacted me hard. Just to see that maybe now these girls can have it different.
And before you go, do you have any other messages for girls who might be, hesitating to get into sports more?
Just dive in. I mean, you'll meet friends and family that you'll become very, very close with. No matter the sport, you build these connections that are deeper than just teammates. And you can look up to many of your coaches. There's fantastic people out there that want to see you do well and want to see you thrive. Get involved. You won't regret it.
Thanks so much for joining us, Peyton.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Peyton Kaler is a 17-year-old student who launched Shoot to Inspire. That's a basketball training camp that encouraged other girls to get into sports. And for more on the story, go to cbc.ca/Manitoba or tune in tonight to CBC Television with the news at 6. It's 7:45, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Right now, it's 0 degrees at the Forks. There's going to be periods of drizzle today, going up to a high of +3. Overcast tonight with some fog patches developing overnight. Breezy, but that wind will become light in the evening with a low of 0. Tomorrow, cloudy with fog patches breaking up in the morning and a high of +4. Well, as our series on violence among youth continues, we turn our attention to social media and the role it plays in triggering, fostering, and even accelerating violent behavior among young people. It's a link social scientists have found hard to quantify, but Desmond Patton has led groundbreaking research into how violence online can trigger and accelerate violence in the real world. He's become an expert in this growing area of social science, with his work being published in the journal Nature, Washington Post, NPR, and Vice News. Desmond Patton is the Schwartz University Professor of Social Policy at the University of Pennsylvania, and CBC's Marcy Marcusa spoke with him on Friday.
Good afternoon. Good to be with you.
So tell me from your perspective, what role social media plays in violence?
So I think we should take a step back and understand that social media really is a neighborhood. It's a community like the ones we actually live in. And I think what we see is that a lot of the tried and true methods that accelerate violence in the real world also represent themselves in social media spaces. And so in my work, I have found that language and imagery, in particular, video, music, emoji, all can be accelerants for active aggression or threats that may take place on a variety of social media platforms.
How is it different from the back in the day? Don't listen to that tune, it will lead you to act. What's the shift?
One is the sheer publicity of your comments and your actions that happen on social media platforms. So effectively, social media becomes a megaphone for the argument that you would have with a friend or with a group. And what happens is that when you make a comment that disrespects an individual or a group, then you also have other individuals, some for whom you may know, some for whom you may not know, who can all then comment and add to perhaps what could have been a simple argument now becomes a big argument that folks then have to defend outside of social media. So that kind of pounding on effect really accelerates an argument that happens on social media.
How do you determine if it will translate in the real world or when it doesn't? Are there things that are shared in common when you look at the types of conversations that are happening?
You know, that's really difficult to discern, but what we've learned from young people is that disrespect and grief are two big triggers for language they may shift from a general conversation to a more threatening and aggressive conversation. In one of my studies, I found a 2-day window from when someone was initially coming to social media to express deep pain, trauma, and grief. And then folks would disrespect and comment on that pain. And then their language shifted from one of grief to one of aggression within a 2-day window.
You've talked about the anonymity offered by social media and how it can accelerate potential violence. But can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I think a lot of us get really confident behind the screen. It affords us a way to speak in language actions that we probably would not say in front of each other. And so I spent a lot of time speaking with violence prevention interrupters, and they talk a lot about how it's a lot easier for someone to quell an argument that happens in face-to-face because you have that kind of person-to-person effect. But behind the keyboard, it is a lot harder. Folks are more confident, and they're more, they engage in more brave language, if you will, behind the keyboard.
How does that affect something moving into the real world, or what does that do to the original poster?
There's a code that happens within some neighborhoods where if you do something to me, I have to do something back to you. So this is a similar behavior that we see unfold on social media, but the difference is the sheer audience and the kind of amplification of aggression. And something that we don't talk about enough is the kind of optimization for aggression and threats that oftentimes can happen on social media platforms as well. And so taken together, you have a really chaotic environment for which arguments can no longer be simple arguments. You are now arguing with the community, with society on social media.
You've studied as well an aspect of interruption, how interrupting social media can preempt or even prevent violence. Can you explain how that works?
Absolutely. You know, I really think that we have been getting it wrong with the focus on threats online. And what I've learned with over a decade of study on this topic is that we really should think about social media as a diagnostic tool to understand root causes. And in digging deeper, I began to understand that the threats that you visually see, that you can recognize as a threat, is a symptom of a larger issue that could be one related to trauma, one related to poverty, one related to grief and loss. And so I really think that we should be spending our time trying to understand the context clues that young people and adults are leaving for us on social media as a way to prevent language that can be accelerated on social media platforms.
You mentioned grief and loss. I know you've also published a groundbreaking finding in the journal Nature, which showed how grief is a pathway to aggressive communication on platforms like, actually specifically on Twitter, is what you write about, now X. Can you draw the line for that, how that happens?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest things that I learned from doing this study is that many young people are using social media to cope with trauma and pain. And that is a different narrative that we hear, that a lot of young people are using it to start arguments and fights. So that's one thing that I think we need to clear up, is that many young people are using these tools for promotive behaviors. What we would see is that a young person will have experienced a loss in their community or in their family. They will then go to a social media platform. Back then it was Twitter, now it could be TikTok or Instagram, and they will just memorialize that individual. And what we would then see, particularly in the city of Chicago, is that then an individual who is in the same network as the person that is grieving will then make a comment, a disrespectful comment, or they will take an image that has been posted and they may draw symbols on it or write very derogatory terms on it. And then that becomes the trigger for tons of comments that come from the original poster and then the poster that is making disrespectful comments. And you can see 600, 700 comments related to one expression of grief. And then after all of that, then the original poster now has to defend themselves. And then you have the community, you have your friends, you have your family all on your back in that space. And that becomes the next thing that can lead to violence offline.
Are there cultural nuances in the language? What did you find, especially among vulnerable communities?
You know, this was a really humbling experience because what it showed me is that I don't know what young people are saying online, and many of us do not know what young people are saying online. And so as a social work scientist, I have now had to grapple with language in very contextual ways. And so in the spaces that I work in, I've had to get really clear about African-American English and social media speak and to really try to discern what is being said. This is where my expertise ends. And so what we have done in my research lab, the SAFE Lab, is that we hire young people and community members as domain experts, not as participants, as domain experts who bring in their lived experiences, their understanding of language, the cultural nuances that inform how people interpret language. And that becomes really helpful in helping us to understand what is being communicated online. This became really clear in trying to disaggregate between an expression of grief, an expression of aggression. And in many cases, artificial intelligence would get that wrong because it wouldn't have the context needed to make an easy decision in that space.
Can you give us an example?
Well, I think one example is with drill music, which is a form of hip hop. And one of the kind of challenging pieces is that, you know, you may have a young person who is on the train, they're in a car, they're listening to their favorite drill music song, and they post it. And that example may have curse words, it may have the N-word, it may have other kind of cultural artifacts that to the untrained eye might be perceived as being aggressive or threatening. However, what we do is oftentimes we go back to those communities and talk with those young people about expression. And what we learn is that it was just a lyric. It was innocuous, it had no meaning, it was a lyric that they liked and they posted online. However, you know, because of the type of peering and hypersurveillance that happens in Black and Brown communities, that extraction of language becomes one that becomes really problematic for how we're actually seeing and understanding what young people are trying to say online.
Which circles right back to what you said at the beginning, which is here's a bunch of adults trying to discern what's going on and thinking we're solving things, but we actually aren't even speaking the same language as a lot of the young people that are posting. Safe Lab, you mentioned as well. I want to ask you more about that.
So Safe Lab is a research group. We are social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, computer scientists, youth, and community members all trying to make meaning of the things that young people are posting online. I think we should be concerned about the posting behaviors that are happening on social media. And I think we take it too far. I think we need to think about social media as a space that can be helpful for diagnosing root causes of violence. We need to be spending more time listening and talking to young people. And we absolutely need to have parental involvement. And parents should be talking to their young people about how they're using social media, who they're speaking with on social media, and the types of things that are coming up on social media. But what we have missed time and time again is that young people are also quite brilliant in how they can intervene in their own communities. And oftentimes what I see is young people using joy and humor and poetry to intervene in slight arguments that can quickly spin out. And so we need to do more to support building thriving and healthy social media environments. And that includes all of us. It can't just be a social media platform issue or parental issue. We actually need all hands on deck. Social media should not be viewed as this big bad bully. It is a complicated space. It's one that you need to be in tune with. Social media is life. It's not just this virtual thing. So pay attention.
That was Desmond Patton speaking with CBC's Marcy Marcusa. He's a Schwartz University professor of social policy and communications and professor of psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania. Just a few minutes ahead of 8 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, some First Nations leaders are calling for changes in the way accommodations are booked for medical patients. It comes after a recent viral video showed a First Nations woman zip-tied in the lobby of downtown Winnipeg's Marlborough Hotel. An ethics professor is calling for a broader conversation on medically assisted dying for the treatment of mental illness. The University of Manitoba's Neil MacArthur says Maid for mental illness can be tricky from an ethical standpoint, but should still be an option. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. Right now it's 0 degrees at the Forks. We're looking for periods of drizzle today and a high of +3. A little bit breezy too, with some gusts up to 50 kilometers an hour around noon. Tonight, overcast with fog patches developing overnight. The breeze becoming light this evening, low 0. Tomorrow, cloudy with fog patches breaking up in the morning and a high of +4. In Brandon, cloudy today, fog with near 0 visibility at times and a high of +3. Mainly cloudy tonight with fog patches developing, low -1, and cloudy tomorrow with fog patches breaking up in the morning and a high of +4. Well, still to come on Information Radio, going to classes, maintaining your grades, going to work, and navigating relationships. So that's a lot to juggle when you're a student, and sometimes the pressure to be perfect can further complicate life. Still ahead, we'll hear how an event at the University of Manitoba is helping students say bye-bye to perfectionism. All that and more to come on Information Radio. You're listening to CBC 1 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Marcusa today. World Report is up next.
Q with Tom Power. Alana Glazer is the actor and comedian who co-created and co-starred in the hilariously raunchy, unabashedly feminist hit comedy series Broad City.
Welcome to She Work. We are officially open for shizness.
She drops by Q as she prepares for performances in support of the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Next, coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Patients in Sault Ste. Marie say they are scared for their health after finding out 10,000 people will be left without primary care in that northern Ontario city because of a doctor shortage. We'll talk about their concerns and the solutions coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. 5 former and current NHLers will make their first appearance in a London, Ontario court today. The members of Canada's 2018 World Junior Hockey team are facing sexual assault charges. This afternoon, London police will also update the public on the case. Karen Pauls has more.
Await the conclusion of the judicial proceedings.
NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman still isn't saying much about this case or the league's internal investigation, which was completed months ago but never made public or shared with the players' teams.
Allegations can get made, and sometimes when you look into it, there's no substance there. We try to respect due process.
That due process starts this morning with the first court appearances.
The judge will read to them the charges they're facing.
Eric Macramella is a sports lawyer in Ottawa.
The issue of bail is going to be discussed. And ultimately, the court will assess whether they're a flight risk.
New Jersey Devils center Michael McLeod faces 2 charges, sexual assault and being party to the offense. Cal Foote, also of the Devils, Philadelphia Flyers goaltender Carter Hart, Dylan Dubé of the Calgary Flames, and former Ottawa Senators player Alex Fermenton, all charged with 1 count of sexual assault. Their lawyers have all said they'll plead not guilty. At a news conference this afternoon, London police will be asked why it closed its case in 2019, then reopened it in 2022 after the alleged victim filed a civil lawsuit that Hockey Canada quietly settled for $3.5 million. Robert Talak was her lawyer at the time.
There'll be a bit of a media feeding frenzy for a while, and then we'll get into a very elongated, slow process with heavy money and lots of lawyers on one side. And it's going to take years.
It's unlikely any of the men will be playing professional hockey during that time. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is back in the Middle East. He's trying to secure a deal for the release of Israeli hostages and more humanitarian aid for the people in Gaza. The CBC's Richard Madden is following the story from Washington. And Richard, what can you tell us about Blinken's latest visit to the region?
Yeah, this is Secretary Blinken's fifth trip to the Middle East since the Israel-Hamas war began, and it comes just days after the U.S. launched counterattacks against Iranian-backed militants in Syria, Iraq, and now Yemen. More signs this conflict is escalating, potentially spreading across the region. Now, Blinken's first stop is Saudi Arabia, where he'll discuss that ceasefire proposal recently drafted between the CIA, officials from Israel, Qatar, and Egypt. The plan would pause fighting for 6 weeks and arrange a hostage release between the Israelis and Hamas. Now, Qatar, which has acted as a key mediator between Israel and Hamas, sounded optimistic, but a Hamas spokesperson recently said it's not happening, and Israeli officials are apparently divided, saying any deal would be perceived as a concession to Hamas. Yesterday, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said of this ceasefire, the ball is in Hamas's court. So that's on the table. He also said Blinken will push to get life-saving supplies to Palestinians in Gaza.
The needs of the Palestinian people are something that are going to be front and center in the U.S. approach, and that we want to ensure that they are getting access to life-saving food, medicine, water, shelter.
So Blinken has a difficult needle to thread as he begins his high-stakes talks.
There were more strikes overnight by the U.S. and the U.K. against Houthis in the Red Sea. What do we know?
Yeah, U.S. forces reportedly launched several new rounds of airstrikes against Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. Officials say they were poised to attack ships in the Red Sea. Now, this comes just days after the U.S. attacked dozens of targets in Iraq and Syria. The White House says these strikes are just the start in response to that deadly drone attack by Iranian-backed militants that killed 3 U.S. service members at a remote outpost in Jordan a week earlier. Now, the Pentagon says it does not want to start a new war with Iran, but the challenge for the White House is how to retaliate without sparking a wider war.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Volodymyr Zelensky is asking Ukraine's parliament to extend martial law and general mobilization. Under the proposal, martial law would be extended another 90 days. That means most Ukrainian men aged 18 to 60 are not allowed to leave the country. They may be called up for military service. There is more pushback this morning to Alberta's planned changes to gender policy, this time from some Northwest Territories parents. There are no qualified specialists for gender-affirming healthcare in the territory, so families are often referred to Alberta clinics. If the province's proposed legislation passes later this year, that care will be restricted. As Sarah Kromolowski tells us, parents are frustrated.
What did you get on your sub?
Goat cheese.
Amanda St. Denis lives in Yellowknife. She's the mother of 2 trans kids, a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old.
As a parent, it's terrifying.
Her 12-year-old daughter is scheduled to meet with Edmonton gender-affirming care specialists next month.
The wait lists are years long. It took us, this is our, first appointment after being referred to years ago. So if we have to be transferred to another clinic, what does that mean?
Local trans advocate Chelsea Thacker believes there's reason to worry. Thacker works for Northern Mosaic Network, a 2S LGBTQ organization. Part of their role is to help trans NWT residents navigate medical travel.
Any referral directly goes to Alberta Services. So if they no longer decide that they are going to provide care even to NWT residents, then we will see a wipeout of services that are available to families.
The Northwest Territories Health Authority says their staff only recently learned about the new Alberta restrictions. A spokesperson told CBC they don't know yet what the changes will mean for residents trying to access gender-affirming care, but said they're working to find answers. Sarah Kromolowski, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Romance scams are a multi-million-dollar problem in this country. Canadians are being convinced to hand over hundreds of thousands of dollars to someone they met online. We hear their stories when police get involved, but we rarely hear from the people committing the crimes. One recently tried to trick CBC reporter Erica Johnson, and when she called him out, he agreed to talk to her about the scam.
I'm Bobby Brown. I'm from Sacramento, California.
I read the Instagram message that popped up on my phone, supposedly from Bobby Brown, an American oil engineer working in Scotland. Nice smile, he wrote. Within 6 weeks, he proposed. I'd been waiting to see how he'd try to get money, but finally said, I knew the truth. He agreed to talk if CBC concealed his identity, worried for his safety. His real hometown's in southern Nigeria, he said. He uses photos he's stolen online to love bomb women.
I can tell you I'm a doctor, I'm an engineer.
He tells women he can't access his bank account since, he's working overseas. Needs gift cards to buy phone data, he says, which he then sells on the black market. Once a woman's clearly in love, he claims his son has been rushed to an American hospital. He urgently needs her to send a $3,000 deposit. He sends photos of a boy in a hospital bed.
Those are all fake.
Psychologist Andre Wong says people who think they're in a romantic relationship feel obligated to help.
And we want to say yes and feel helpful.
945 people lost more than $50 million to romance scammers last year, and that's just the reported fraud. My romance scammer says he has to lie to support his family.
We're sorry, we're not happy doing this, but we have no option.
Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
All right, let's talk about the Grammys last night.
No, that was it. No, when I get nervous, I tell the truth.
Jay-Z won the Dr. Dre Global Impact Award for his achievements in the music industry, and he used his time on stage to talk about his wife, Beyonce. She has 32 Grammys, but she's never won Album of the Year.
Obviously, it's subjective because, it's music and it's opinion-based, but she has more Grammys than everyone and never won Album of the Year. So even by your own metrics, that doesn't work.
Last night, Taylor Swift won her 4th Album of the Year prize, breaking a record she previously shared with Frank Sinatra, Paul Simon, and Stevie Wonder. It was also a big night for Montreal-born singer Allison Russell.
He was black, haven't you heard? The mother of all was dark and good. He was black, didn't you know? Is that why you hate my black skin so?
She won Best American Roots Performance for this song, Eve Was Black. Russell accepted the award at a ceremony ahead of the main gala. This is her first Grammy win.
Do you hate or do you lust? Do you despise or do you yearn?
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Back to the garden, back to your black skin, back to the innocence, back to the shine you lost when you enslaved your kid.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg and worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page and the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. It's -1 at the Forks. Yeah, the temperature has dropped from 0 earlier. We're going up to a high of +3 today, breezy with periods of drizzle. And still to come on the show, we've all heard that saying, nobody's perfect, but there's no question that at one point or another, most of us have felt the pressure to be perfect. We'll hear some tips on how to fight perfectionists, still to come on Information Radio. Minutes after 8 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the head of Winnipeg's transit union is angry after a driver was assaulted on Saturday. It happened on a route in northeast Winnipeg. The driver managed to stop the bus and let other passengers off, but he wasn't able to get off. And union president Chris Scott says that is a big concern. A Winnipeg blogger says this city needs to put money into its transit master plan instead of wasting hundreds of millions on road expansion projects. Michael Durand-Wood writes about municipal issues on his blog, Dear Winnipeg. We're going to hear what he thinks, as well as opinions of others coming up as the city releases its draft budget on Wednesday. Our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. And joining us now is our show director, Corey Funk, with a look at the weather and traffic.
Emily, I've had this song stuck in my head all day.
Okay.
And we waited for the sun to shine.
on a gray, foggy day.
You lived in Newfoundland for a while. Do you recognize this?
Takes me right back to Water Street, bye.
That's right. Eddie Coffee, the classic Gray Foggy Day.
Nice.
Oh, man. It feels like Newfoundland out there, doesn't it?
Newfoundland weather in Winnipeg
Yes,
today.
exactly. Shout out to the Newfoundland out there. All the Newfoundlanders out there. Hope it feels a little bit like home, maybe.
Yeah, right. Maybe it's even for people from Scotland or other countries are feeling at home.
Exactly. Maybe. -1 right now, heading for a high of 3 degrees. Fog advisory in effect for all of southern Manitoba this morning, right across the province, east to west. And it looks like we're in for pretty much a cloudy weather for the rest of the week, right until Friday and overnight. So get used to these clouds. Unfortunately, looks like, at least according to long-term forecast, won't be seeing the sun until Saturday and Sunday when things get back to more wintry conditions. But right now, -1, heading for a high of 3 degrees. Periods of drizzle today, and then tonight get a dip down to 0. High of 4 tomorrow, and then clouds, gray. Hate to be the bearer of bad news. Unless somehow you
gray. That's the forecast.
Exactly. You could just pretend you're in a murder mystery novel, and it's fine, right? So that's the forecast here for Winnipeg right now. In terms of the commute, really has been quite quiet there on the roads. Haven't got any calls about any major issues. Just heard earlier about some freezing drizzle on Highway 16 earlier from Thomas. He said he had to slow down a little bit. It was getting a little bit slippery. Had to slow down about 10 kilometers an hour, so to 90. So be careful if you're on Highway 16. Other than that, if you see anything else going on, let me know, or don't see anything because of this fog, let me know. I'll let other folks know. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
14 minutes after 8 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. University students often have a lot on their plates, from worrying about getting to class on time to maintaining good grades and navigating relationships, as well as working part-time jobs. It can be a lot to juggle. On top of that, there's sometimes an expectation to be perfect, and that only complicates things even more. And we all know that nobody's perfect, but it can be hard to part ways with perfectionist tendencies. But a University of Manitoba event aims to help students start that process, and it's using science-backed facts to do so. The university's Student Transitions and Success Center is hosting a conference tomorrow called Bye Bye Perfectionism, the Science of Growth Mindset. Stephanie Young is the Student Transitions lead at the center, and I spoke with her earlier this morning about what she hears from students about the need to be perfect.
Yeah, we hear a lot from students about that. And I want to point out, I think, for listeners, that this need to be perfect doesn't necessarily always coordinate with grades. So some students, they're straight A+ students and talking about that need to be perfect, and others are maybe struggling a bit more. But what we hear a lot from students is just this sense of pressure, I would say. Whether that's financial pressure, sort of just the general societal pressure to get a university degree, parental pressure that they're perceiving. They just feel a lot of weight on themselves. And as a result of that, often feel like, it's just crucial to just push as hard as possible and to do as well as possible in university. So that's what we're hearing from students, kind of all achievement levels.
Was that your experience as well as a student?
It's interesting. In some aspects of it, it was, and some not as much. So I think because when I entered university, I had parents and teachers really just driving home this message that university is such a new challenge, and you might experience a drop in grades. Which I did a little bit, especially in the calculus course I was taking at the time. I kind of made a pact with myself, if I failed the third quiz, I would have to drop and retake the course, which I did. But I sort of felt prepared at that time. Once I was in the higher level courses, though, I think getting to know other students and different, exciting opportunities to participate in that may have been linked with grades, I think that pressure started to rise for me as well, especially going into graduate school. So yeah, I absolutely empathize with that experience.
And so what are the emotional effects of being a perfectionist?
Yeah, so perfectionism is kind of this difficult combination of having really high standards for yourself, but also a serious amount of criticism, self-criticism that goes with that. And so some of the emotions that can arise can be things related to, anxiety, depression. There's definitely this pervasive fear of failure. And sometimes it leads to even apathy, actually, after a while, especially if performance isn't really matching the energy that you're putting out towards achievement. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of emotional effects that can come with it. Loneliness would be another one, just feeling kind of alone in that experience and not realizing that, so many other students are going through that too.
Mm. Are there ways, though, that perfectionism can also be a good thing?
There is a debate in the research literature about that a little bit. So the type that we kind of speak with students about is often, definitely maladaptive, right? But there is a segment of the research literature that talks about this sort of adaptive perfectionism, which, they describe as being, these high standards that maybe don't come along with the self-criticism so much. So it probably depends how you look at it, but once you combine, high standards with high amounts of self-criticism, it's not going to be an adaptive experience, that's for sure.
Mm. And then sometimes, you speak of a growth mindset. And what does that mean?
Yeah, so growth mindset is a term that was coined by Carol Dweck, and she has a lot of books out there if people are interested in that topic, um, just for the general public. But growth mindset is essentially the idea, or the belief, I guess I should say, that you can actually grow your abilities with effort, with input from other people, with kind of an adaptiveness to changing strategies when what you're doing currently isn't working. And it's contrasted with this idea of a fixed mindset. So someone with a fixed mindset would be more focused on innate talent. In the student context, it might be saying things like, I'm just really naturally good at math, or I'm just not good at math, or writing, or not good at writing. So it's this idea that, no matter how much effort you put in, there's sort of a cap on what you're able to do. Whereas the growth mindset is much more focused on being able to kind of master different things if you just put some effort into it and access the resources that you need for that.
And of course, tomorrow's event is only for students, and it's going to focus on sharing the science, back tips, some of them you've already touched on, to help people tackle perfectionism. But what advice would you give to someone listening right now who might be realizing they struggle with this too?
I do have a few key points to kind of deal with that perfectionism, and they all pretty much come back to self-compassion, which often is not, I guess, an immediately exciting sounding concept, or sometimes people feel like it's almost cutting yourself too much slack in some ways. But the definition of self-compassion really comes back to taking that compassion that we often so easily and lend to other people and lending that to ourselves. So a couple of things when you're really feeling that perfectionism rising up, can be things like recognizing your common humanity with other people. So whatever it is that you're struggling with at the time, actually taking a moment to step back and think about how so many other people have been in the same position that you've been in, and that we all suffer together in some ways in the human experience. So you can use that as a bit of a meditative activity, to just step back and think, am I really the first person who's tried to do this and failed in some way, or not meet my own standard in some way? Probably not. So it gives you a chance to really just connect with the human experience.
I guess we could all go a bit easier on ourselves.
We definitely could. I think there's so many, students that I speak with that, you bring up this idea and there's this feeling of, I'm already too easy on myself. I'm already not studying enough, right? But often the kind of resistance to doing what you need to do can come from being too hard on yourself. And I also talk about, tending to needs that you might be ignoring. This certainly comes into play for students, but I think everyone else as well. If you're working through your lunch, for example, there may be situations where that is truly, really necessary. Something really urgent has come up. But I think it's a good time to step back and ask yourself, is this work so uniquely important that I can't tend to my own basic physical needs today? Usually the answer is no.
Yeah, that's some good perspective. Thanks so much, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Stephanie Young is the Student Transitions Lead at the University of Manitoba's Student Transitions and Success Center. The center will be hosting Bye Bye Perfectionism, the Science of Growth Mindset, tomorrow on campus.
CBC Sports is your source for sports coverage and insights you won't find anywhere else. Get the athlete's real story on the Player's Own Voice podcast, hosted by Anastasia Busis. Find Player's Own Voice on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. And whether you're a hardcore fan or just looking to hold your own in the conversation, the Buzzer newsletter helps make you smarter about sports. Subscribe today at cbcsports.ca/thebuzzer.
23 minutes after 8 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, and joining me now in studio is Corey Funk with a traffic update.
Yeah, I just got a call from Lauren on the commuter line. She says eastbound Abinogi-Meekina just after Pembina is really, really slow going right now because of construction. Folks are going about 30 kilometers an hour. Her advice is keep left, zipper merge if you can. She saw some folks zipper merging, so hats off to them. So just keep an eye out for that. That seems to be pretty much the only issue going on the roads in the city right now. Once again, that's eastbound Abinogi-Meekina just after Pembina. If you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, whether you're walking, biking, driving. Sidewalks are slippery, so look out for that. 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Corey Funk. Time now for some music. Canadian indie star Feist returns to Winnipeg tomorrow night. The Multitudes finale tour wraps up what many see as Feist's most all-encompassing work yet. From that album, this is Forever Before.
Flash and thunder loves me back, and in lightning I can keep my energy intact. And when the lightning is like the sun, I feel what love could be. Truly illuminated, the future does the landing lights for me.
That was Canadian indie star Feist and a legend in Canadian music. You can see her playing tomorrow night at the Burton Cummings Theatre as part of the Multitudes finale tour. Your last chance to see Feist live in concert tomorrow night at the Burton Cummings. Well, we're just coming up towards local news time, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page and on the CBC Listen app. Taking a quick look at the weather, right now it's -1 at the Forks, and we're expecting periods of drizzle today. The fog advisory is still in effect, and it's going to be breezy with gusts up to 40 kilometers an hour around noon and a high of +3. Overcast tonight with some fog patches developing, the breeze becoming light with a low of 0.
Commotion with Elamin Abdelmahmoud.
It's time to talk about funflation.
Crime Story.
You got one witness who can't be found.
This American Life with Ira Glass.
There are signs that read, see something, say something.
Radio Lab.
What is coming up? What is going wrong, actually?
The Sunday Magazine with Pia Chattopadhyay.
How does the last 24 plus hours complicate or change things?
Telling Stories. Sunday night on CBC Radio 1 and on the Listen app.
It's 29 minutes after 8 o'clock. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa, and Corey Funk, our show director, is back in studio with another traffic update.
Yeah, still that fog advisory is in effect. So look out on the highways there. Looking at Manitoba 511 right now, I'm actually seeing poor visibility being reported pretty much right across the province from the Saskatchewan border to the Ontario border. So do look out for that if you are hitting the highways. This afternoon, heard from Tom earlier, or this morning, heard from Thomas earlier, Highway 16 in particular, foggy with some freezing drizzle, so a little slippery as well. So be careful if you're out there. As well, Lauren, eastbound Abinogi-Meekina, just after Pembina. She says really slow going because of construction. So keep left to get around that and zipper merge if you can. If you see anything else, I'll do one more commuter hit. You can give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Corey Funk, and the news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. It is -1. We've dropped a degree in the past hour. A high today of 3, with again a little bit of drizzle today and a southerly breeze this afternoon. The assault of a Winnipeg transit driver Saturday is causing anger and frustration. Police say a 29-year-old Winnipeg man attacked the driver on a route in northeast Winnipeg after he refused to drive him to a street that wasn't along that route. The 39-year-old driver suffered upper body injuries. Union President Chris Scott says bus drivers face all sorts of harassment.
Ranges from racial remarks being yelled at an operator, theft of possessions of another rider, or full-out assault on either the riding public or the operators. It appears that people feel empowered that there are no repercussions to their actions. So we need to let them know that this level of violence will not be tolerated.
Scott hopes the upcoming implementation of the community safety team helps reduce these incidents. He says the team is still on track to be out on the streets by the end of the month. Some First Nations leaders are calling for changes in the way accommodations are booked for medical patients. It comes after a recent viral video showed a First Nations woman zip-tied in the lobby of downtown Winnipeg's Marlborough Hotel. It is one of 31 establishments on a list by Indigenous Services Canada where First Nations people can stay while they're in Winnipeg for health appointments. But another place on that list is doing things differently. CBC's Emily Brass explains.
This is where our cafeteria is.
Families are sitting around tables enjoying a hot lunch at Burnell Place. The lodge opened last October in Winnipeg's West End. It's designed so families can stay together. They have their own bathrooms, there's laundry and gathering spaces, and security around the clock.
We have phones in the rooms.
Gwen Flett says she and a partner started the business because of what happened to her as a young patient from St. Teresa Point in a big city for the first time.
You start feeling a little lost. So we wanted to make it feel like they don't have to worry about anything.
The staff are all First Nations. Most of them speak Ojibwe, Cree, Oji Cree, or Salto. Mary Bear works at the front desk. She helps guests navigate the city and the medical system.
I talk to the doctors, I talk to the nurses, and as well as our patients. We told my sisters everything is going to be okay. We're here for you.
Indigenous Services says it's open to working with First Nations on more culturally appropriate lodging like Burnell Place. Emily Brass, CBC News, Winnipeg.
An ethics professor says people with mental illness have a right to end their life with dignity through medically assisted dying. Neil MacArthur at the University of Manitoba says Maid for mental illness belongs in a broader mental health strategy.
Politicians say over and over again, well, this has to be part of a comprehensive mental health strategy, and then they don't produce a comprehensive mental health strategy. It can only take so long. They can't just keep pushing this and pushing this and pushing this and saying, well, we need safeguards. Yes, we need safeguards, but you've had years now.
A Manitoba woman tells CBC she feels discriminated against by the delay of Maid's expansion and is now considering suicide. MacArthur says people are right to feel frustrated and excluded by endless delays. Maid was supposed to be expanded in March, but that has now been put off for at least 3 years. Winnipeg is releasing its draft budget on Wednesday, and organizations right across the city have their wish lists ready. Among them, the Manitoba Heavy Construction Association. President Chris Lawrence wants to see signs of a bigger economic partnership between the city and the province.
It's a transition year, challenging, encouraging, supporting leadership from the Premier and the Mayor to develop a new financial model that focuses on economic growth. That's the kind of message I would love to see emanate from the tabling of the budget.
A Winnipeg blogger, Michelle Durand-Wood, says the city needs to put money into its transit master plan instead of wasting hundreds of millions, he says, on road expansion. Other organizations tell CBC News they would like to see more funds going towards libraries and Winnipeg's downtown. While in Brandon, it was a weekend of intense deliberations, but Manitoba's second largest city has now approved its first ever 4-year budget. Lois Rustin is president of the Brandon Chamber of Commerce.
4-year cycle is a much easier and more digestible way for our entire community to plan for any increases and to understand what the city's financial plan will be going forward.
One of the main sticking points in Brandon was an almost 10% property tax increase. Rustin says that could add to challenges some businesses are already facing. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.
Thanks. That was Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. And Corey Funk is back in studio with one last look at the weather and the roads.
Gray, foggy day out there today. -1, heading for a high today of -3 here in Winnipeg with some periods of drizzle. Believe it or not. Fog near zero. There's a fog advisory across the province this morning, across southern Manitoba, that is. Still wintry up into Dooley Lake, which is our cold spot at -22, and cloudy pretty much all week until Saturday when the sun might poke out and things might look a little more wintry again. So enjoy, I guess, as much as you can, this foggy, dreary weather. Embrace it.
Yeah, those who have those sun lamps, now's the time to turn them on.
Yeah, it is definitely, it is definitely that time. So, yeah.
We're not used to that either. In Manitoba, usually we have that sunny, bright blue sky that comes with cold weather and dry.
That's our big thing. It's like, at least it's sunny, right?
Right. Not this year.
This year.
We're having coastal kind of weather.
And it's not even a dry cold. It's like a wet cold out there, too. Ugh.
Oh, it goes to your bones.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
We can get through this, and the cold weather is coming back in about a week or so.
Exactly. You are my bright spot today, Emily.
Oh, you too, Corey Funk. It's always a pleasure working with you.
You too.
And it's always a pleasure having you out there listening to us on Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1 in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, and Marcy Marcusa will be back tomorrow. Hope you have a great Monday.